Welcome, listeners, to another TasFarmers Talks podcast. Today, we're joined by Janie Finlay, MP and Deputy Leader for the Opposition in Tasmania, here to discuss some of the biggest issues facing ag, everything from deer, wallaby management through to council rates and the future of GBEs. But I'll go around the table and introduce everyone as we always do. Janie, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Always a pleasure.
Your background, Janie, in life and the universe?
Wow, 30 seconds or less. So actually one of the things that I think is always really lovely to reinforce about me, because I like to be known as practical, is I'm a furniture maker by trade. So
Yeah, right.
I at school wasn't necessarily great at maths and English, but rocked at woodwork, metalwork, tech drawing, all that sort of stuff, sport, where my sort of competitive edge and stuff came from. So I see myself, in that sort of problem solver. But I had a business in Sydney making furniture. I moved back to Tassie because my mum got sick and passed away, and then I started working with young people out at Ashley, and that was sort of what got me in my community work. Was at the Launceston City Council for the best part of 20 years.
Yep.
Goodness. And then in that time sort of wove through a few different businesses. So I had hospitality, award-winning hospitality businesses, worked in commercial real estate, worked in my partner's business in terms of more of a global sort of perspective around tech. So done a whole lot of different things, which I think is really lovely and useful for a politician to sort of have had feet in the real world, a bit of skin in the game, and a bit of practicality, a bit of manual hands-on work, and a bit of hard labour.
Shout out to David.
Bit of hard labour.
Hard labour
Boom, boom.
on the tools. Nathan Cox, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Grayson.
It's good to have you, Mr. President. Lots going on, which we'll get into shortly.
It's a full ticket today.
And, of course, our own Renaissance man, author, boat builder, fly fisherman, angler, I should say. Neil Grose, have I missed anything, any of your talents?
No, you've probably loaded up far too far on how little they are. What's the old saying? Jack of all trades, but master of none.
Well, I wouldn't say that about your skills and efforts. Something of an extraordinaire in that policy space. But let's move straight on to the big ticket item today. The federal government has only in the last half an hour announced the sale of Rushy. Nathan Cox, would you like to make a statement on that fact, that they've approved the sale to Gresham House?
So, yes, Grayson, the Treasurer in the last little while has announced that he's approving the sale of Rushy Lagoon to Gresham House. We know that the intention of Gresham House is to plant out the 22,000 hectares, or a fair proportion of it, in pine trees for a carbon project. While we aren't against any sort of foreign investment, and definitely not against, have no issue with farm forestry, what we do have an issue with is the use of taxpayer funds taking an equity stake in the removal of agricultural land from our productive platform here in this state. The impact that we'll see as a flow-on effect to the local dairy production and the logistics around that will be significant, and we'll also see a significant impact on the beef market and beef processing supply into the next couple of years, as those weaners and finished cattle don't show up in sale yards or on hooks in an abattoir. It's an absolute betrayal of national interest, Tasmanian agriculture, and the people's trust in the decision-making process. We've seen a lot of things in the process that have been a bit smelly. There's a distinct odour there that we're not very happy with, that there's a lot in the community, in even the political scene, that aren't happy with. There's conflicts right throughout this whole process. There were obviously a confidence given to Gresham that this was potentially just a formality or a fait accompli. So they felt quite confident in going and ordering all the pine trees well before the FIRB decision was ever passed down and the Treasurer announced it. We're actually really, really disappointed in this. We think we made great arguments, great case alongside the Tasmanian community and even nationally, because this isn't the only place in Australia this is happening. We're hearing of it in highly productive areas in Western Australia and South Australia, exactly the same sort of behaviours. And it just demonstrates that the Treasurer, FIRB and anyone else involved with this decision does not and do not have Australia's national interest at heart. Our food security, our food sovereignty, our ability to conduct international transactions because of being able to export these products and actually make the country some money. Their respect for all that is absolutely non-existent. They're chasing an ideology and it's just not good enough.
Neil, the government admitted in their media release that they had given Gresham that confidence. As a taxpayer, I would object to the use of my dollars being given to a foreign organisation. But what's your immediate reaction to the news?
Oh, look, I think it's just another kick in the guts for Tasmanian farmers. I mean, we are trying to be the most productive, resilient, innovative farmers. But when the rug is pulled out from underneath you in the interest of growing trees, not even for timber, but just for carbon credits, it would be a blow to all farmers who are looking for government confidence and support to farmers rather than seeing productive farmland taken away. And there would be many who would be saying, okay, so what's next? So when we look at farmland in Tasmania, which might be considered by some often in Canberra as being marginal, so what's that? Is that Flinders Island because it's hard to get cattle off the island and we might just fill Flinders Island up with trees? Is it the rest of Cape Portland? Is it down the east coast? What is it? What next? Is Tasmania and other areas in Australia now to become a target for international funds just looking at offsetting carbon pollution in other parts of the world and taking Tasmania's productive agriculture and the fabric of our communities away with it? So when you think about the fabric of that northeast community, I've spent a lot of time in the northeast, they must be feeling just completely unvalued by anyone in government. That all the arguments that were put, we've been ignored, we've pretty much been lied to on many occasions. The community up there were thinking, oh, well, we're just a pawn in just a large game. And this from a political party, a Labor government, whose ideology is standing up and making sure that no one ever misses out. Well, there's a whole bunch of people in the northeast who are going to miss out by a decision made in Canberra to service overseas businesses with the help of taxpayers' funds.
Nathan, this excuse about the land not being suitable for agricultural use?
Thank you, Grayson. That is a line that's been peddled by our federal agriculture minister and also mentioned by the Treasurer in their press release today that the ground was classified as low quality, low productivity ground. There are farmers up in that area, and we only have to look at the highly productive dairies on Rushy that have operated in spite of low inputs and low capital investment. They've still been highly productive, and you can't do that on poor ground. You look at some of the surrounding farms that are on similar ground, highly productive, the uplift that would have been available to an agricultural purchaser in productivity on the 22,000 hectares of Rushy Lagoon would have been phenomenal. Would have made everyone's eyes water when it finally culminated in total productivity. But what the Federal Agricultural Minister and the Treasurer have alluded to around land classification is nothing but dribble.
And you talk about productive agriculture, and the proof is in the pudding of the price. So what's the final price for Rushy? It's about $100 million or thereabouts. So Bert Farquhar, when he first bought that property, paid $124 an acre for it. And he worked through that. He worked extraordinarily hard at improving the productivity, improving the yield. He was a sad victim of very high interest rates, a number of other perfect storms around an abattoir going broke in Tasmania and a bunch of other things. But if Bert was still operating in this current climate of relatively low interest rates and so on, that property would be extraordinarily productive. It's not just crap to put radiata pine trees in. This is land that's gone from $124 an acre to be costing $100 million in total. Like Bert paid $10.1 million for it. It's not unproductive land. If it was unproductive land, it wouldn't be worth $100 million to get it.
Local representative on the ground, Janie, what's your immediate reaction?
Well, I've got to tell you, moments like today, I spend days being nervous about coming on podcasts, particularly in this environment. There's a lot of challenges around, right? So what are they going to ask? Where are we going to go? How hard is this conversation to be? And I've got to tell you, 10 minutes before I walk in the door, I'm in a rock and a hard place here, right? The reality is I am a local member in this area. I spend a lot of time out in the northeast. I listen to people. I spend time on farming properties. And the northeast were really clear about this. They were really clear about the impact of this change. When you talk to the mayor, a person in the sector as well, he's really clear about this. So that voice from the northeast and for farmers right across Tasmania that understand what this means up there could not have been clearer. For me, I suppose it was also that message about what it not just meant for farmers, but what it meant for the community. So what it meant for families, what did it mean for the school? And in that release that's come out today, they talk about 190 jobs. I'm always interested in jobs. I'm always interested in, how our economy survives change. And I'm really keen, and I've put a whole lot of questions out since the release came out. What are the jobs? Tell me the titles. Tell me the tasks. What are they casual? Are they contract? Are they permanent? Because as you said, Nathan, I live in the world that I'm not against foreign investment. In most of Tasmania, there's a lot of economic activity that happens around foreign investment. I'm definitely not against farm forestry. So those things are important. And the northeast has got this massive tradition in forestry, right? So there will be people and pockets in the northeast that welcome an opportunity for whether it's the establishment, the harvesting, hopefully the processing. We know we've got a lot of problems in Tasmania in terms of getting product to sawmills and keeping that sort of value out in Tasmania. So there's a lot of conversations, but I want to know the reality. If there are 190 jobs, what sort of jobs? Where will that support? Will the communities remain strong in that sort of activity, and will the school survive? Winnalia was, front and centre of this conversation. So for me, I think it's really important for people to know that there was really strong advocacy out of Tasmania into Canberra around this. I think you can tell almost in the language of the release that Canberra are aware that this was sensitive and it was tricky, and that they, there was this force coming out of the northeast. I know that there's, federal members that were also active in this conversation. So this is really disappointing. I'm really disappointed as the shadow for agriculture, but as the local member. One of the things, and we talked about in the introduction, some of my backgrounds, now that this decision has been taken, I think Tasmanians, there will be this anger and this response and quite rightly this feedback provided. But now you say what next in terms of where are the other challenges, we've got to stay on top of that, but also what now? How can we what is the opportunity to take a positive out of this? So I'm really keen now to turn my mind, having, been clear and public and got in trouble for some of my advocacy around this, but now I'm keen to turn my mind to understanding what this means and continuing the advocacy, that's a terrible word, for people to be clear about what the opportunities are going to be if they're there.
One of the biggest challenges is how farmers in Tasmania now view themselves, how they're valued. Because if we look at commodity prices across the board, particularly in cropping, going through the floor, we're seeing overseas imports increasing, displacing quality Australian and Tasmanian produce. I mean, Grace and I were only talking about it the other day, where Tasmanian farmers pride themselves in exporting high value, high quality food, and in return we import low value, low quality stuff to displace the work that they're doing. And so how can farmers, I guess, see themselves and how they're valued in a national context when some of our best farmland is allowed to be sold like this, in direct contradiction to all the evidence from those who actually know the country up there, they know the way things work, they know the economy of the area, and they know the community of the area. I really worry for farmers, particularly in the northeast. They're doing it tough on a whole range of levels, and this is just another kick in the guts for a community that is well used to kicks in the guts. I mean, back in 2003, we saw the Simplot factory close, and at the same time we saw 3 big sawmills close, and the timber industry was restructured in inverted commas because of the peace deal. You know, I was teaching at the school then. We went from 400 students in December to 300 the following February. Like 100 families left the district, and it's never recovered. And this is just yet another blow to one of the most beautiful and productive regions in Tasmania.
And I think that causes us to step the conversation up higher. That's a challenge for all of Tasmania, isn't it? There is only so much land here. There is only so much places where we can farm, and how.
The frustrating thing is, why must we always have to keep rising to these challenges? They just keep coming. It's just one after the other. It's just one challenge after the other.
Keeps us in the job, Neil. Looking forward, there are some questions that we asked very early on that still haven't been answered, and I think will be answered in time, and they're still very, very concerning. Two of those questions. The first one is, and you only have to do a simple Google search, and you'll find that Gresham House has tax residency somewhere other than Australia, and so you can just Google that.
Capital gains exempt, probably.
Who would know, Grayson? If there's any amount of loopholes there potentially.
Well, they won't be carrying their share of tax payments back to Australia, will they?
Well, you wouldn't think so. The other question that needs to be asked is, where will these carbon credits go? Will they be kept in Australia to offset any emissions our industrials produce, which would be ideal?
We're talking like it's an environmental decision, but the reality to plant a monocultural foreign species in Australia doesn't ring true as environmental to me, Nathan. Do you think that's the case?
I think there's a lot of ideology behind this, Grayson, that you and I can't get our heads around, but is out there permeating top levels of government in this country.
Well, I don't want to dwell on it too much because I'm sure within the next couple of days there's going to be a lot in the media.
No doubt.
But I do want to get onto today's agenda, which is really about our members, as always. And in their annual survey, they gave us 3 or 4 suggestions on what to work on, and one of those included wildlife management. The second there was council rates, and the third issue, Nathan, can you remember what that was off the top of your head? I've seemed to have skipped a page. It was government business enterprise reform. How could I forget? Red tape. If we just kick off with wildlife management, the government in recent months has changed its view around the deer management. Janie, do you have a view on that recent decision and the impacts it's having?
Yeah, look, the impacts are ongoing, aren't they? And it's getting worse. So
Yes.
The systems and structures in place at the moment aren't making a difference, so something has to change. And on this issue, I think that this minister and previous ministers have put their mind to deer management, and there have been changes. Whether the changes go far enough, we'll hear that in terms of the outcomes of the consultations that open now. I'm clear that TasFarmers don't think that they have gone far enough. And this has been one of the really interesting conversations for me since I've been in this shadow role, that when you start in a role, you talk to lots of different people, and different people have a different agenda, and they're all very clear about what's important to them and why their issue is a priority. It's clear to me that there's not one solution to deer management, that it's multi-layered, but it's got to be as easy as possible. So you talked about red tape in terms of that third issue. Taking out the complexity and taking out the layers of rules for this and approvals for that, I think is really important. My take on this now is it's so out of control that there needs to be the strongest response possible. I've had the opportunity for various reasons in very difficult conversations to be speaking to more and more people at the moment that are hunters. And I know that's where the pressure often comes in these policy decisions in terms of farmer response and, hunting sort of experiences. And I had a really great conversation recently from somebody who hunts actively in Tasmania and all around the world and, in other parts of Australia, and said, it is enough. We've got to do something about this now. So I think all of the conversations are changing and all of the community is changing, but there's no doubt that farmers are being hit, the costs and the impact is rising, the numbers are rising, structures and systems aren't making a difference. So it is time for the strongest possible response to be out there.
Can I ask the tough question?
Yeah.
Would you go further and declare deer as an invasive species? Or
So-
is that the Labor Party's view potentially?
So we don't have a policy position on that out there, and even at the last elections when that was asked, we didn't have that as our response, and I know there was disappointment about that. And this is where I'm going to be very Janie in my answer, which may not do me any favours. It's really hard from opposition to be across everything and understand the consequences of certain decisions. And so when I've asked that question about taking away the current classification and changing that, people raise issues with me about, well, that means this and that means that, and you can't do this and you can't do that then. So I really want to understand what that would mean. But I don't think the classification is the only way to get open slather response to deer management here in Tasmania, and there's a lot more that we could be doing now. And I've got a blank in my mind. I can't exactly remember the reason, but it was something about if it's deregulated, then it changes the way certain other things are managed and possible. So I personally, here's the other funny comment, 2029 is meant to be the next election, and in terms of cycles of information and policy development and what we put out there, no one wants another election anytime soon. So in terms of putting out policy positions on things, that's not sort of where we are in the cycle. But I can tell you 100% that in Tasmania, deer numbers are growing, it's out of control, and I think everybody in Tasmania now is recognising we've got to do the hard things about it.
Well, if you were elected, not that we want to hold an election, you would perhaps revisit the issue and make sure enough's been done.
It is no surprise to me that it's the top issue that's come out of your top 3 from the farmer survey. It has been a consistent conversation for a long time, and here's another challenge, with the support of advisors, advice and good information about consequences of decisions, it would be a top priority issue, no doubt. Are the right people in the roles at the moment? You know, that's a whole conversation then about misaligned priorities and agendas within departments and ministerial offices and all that sort of stuff. But getting the right people in the right jobs to be able to get on top of that, no doubt it's a primary issue.
So it'd be fair to say if you were speaking to a farmer today, you'd say, look, it's about really understanding the issue and how we can have the best outcomes.
Oh yeah, obviously, yeah. Yeah,
'cause
I can see the physical impact, the financial impact, and where I think Tasmanians get on board with this now, because it can be a niche issue for farmers, it can be a niche desire for hunters, but where this has actually been an issue, which means it's gone way too long, but now I reckon you're going to see rapid action, is where it becomes a public impact issue. And there, you know, when Michael was driving home the other day and he hit a cow, in my mind, I didn't know what he'd hit first, and I thought, oh, he's probably hit a deer, because I get scared driving home from Parliament all the time.
Yeah.
You know, it is now a public issue, which means I think the policy response will be more rapid.
Yeah,
That's not right,
Well,
and it's unfortunate, but it's true.
A colleague of my wife's, and they work in Beaconsfield, so travelling between Exeter and Beaconsfield, nearly ran into 5 deer just on the outskirts of Exeter near Rookery Road. 5 deer going across the road. So that's one of northern Tasmania's busiest little roads.
Yep.
Deer are everywhere. It's only going to be a matter of
and we've
time.
seen carcass on the southern outlet into Launceston.
Oh, well, you and I have seen them at the wetlands at Riverside,
Yeah.
Grace.
Oh yeah, all the time. They've been there for a long time.
Getting a bit smelly now, but there's new ones get replaced every now and again.
Yeah.
So what we can't lose sight of here is this was a response from farmers, and with the current population, the cost of farmers has risen to a level that is almost unsustainable. If it grows, that cost will obviously grow, and the impact will be far greater on bottom line and infrastructure and all that stuff. Even if we maintain the population, the current cost to our farmers won't go away.
Yeah.
To get the cost down to farmers, whether they've got 2 or whether they've got a mob of 200 or 400 running across their paddocks, we have to get the numbers down to take the financial burden and the resource burden off them, because we know deer go through fences and eat crops and do all that sort of stuff. I think the settings are getting there. I think with the change to the permits to make it easier, more simplified to get permits to deal with them, that rezoning of zone 2 and 3, the merging of those two, that goes a long way, but we still need to do as much as we can, and we think there is more to be done to bring those numbers down, because if we just halt the numbers, we actually just stagnate that cost level at where it is.
Sure.
And it's just the cost burden and the infrastructure damage burden, the environmental damage burden has to come down.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
Well, talking things that explode like Mount Vesuvius,
Or Vesuvius.
sorry, land valuations and council rates just exploding. Land valuations in particular, Neil, we're hearing many revaluations are coming back, and they're quite high.
Yep.
What are you hearing?
Hearing a lot from a lot of surprised farmers. So, summarised in a nutshell, every 6 years the Valuer General, which is a office of the Department of Parks and Wildlife, they revalue all property in Tasmania. It's not all properties are done at the same time, it's rotating. This 6 year cycle has seen 7 of Tasmania's most productive farm areas revalued. The valuations that are coming into farmers' letterboxes at the moment are astonishing. So we've seen farms just down the road here double in value, even though productivity on those farms has decreased. We've seen one farm nearby, one of our very good members, valued at $60,000 a hectare, which when you think about the average market value in that area, and it's good farmland, don't get me wrong, but most of it would sell for between $30,000 and $35,000 a hectare. To see it valued at $60,000 a hectare, you first have to question what was the method used by the Valuer General to come up with that. What was the method used to come up with the doubling of a farm which is on a floodplain which has been impacted significantly by floods over the last 5 or 6 years? And then what flows on from that is the basis for local government to determine your rates. Now, that farmer whose property doubled in value, his rates last year were just a shade under $21,000. So his property has doubled in value, and I shudder to think what his rates demand is going to be this year, and it will probably have a 4 in front of it. And at a time when farm incomes are declining and when farm input costs are increasing, farmers will have to come up with a material payment based on a paper value of their property. So they have to fork out cold hard cash to pay for something which is only on paper. It's not realised, it's not money in the bank, it is just a valuation on a piece of paper. And it significantly changes the dynamic of the economics of agriculture in Tasmania. This is a very, very serious issue. We've written to the Minister in recent days, Minister Digan, seeking that those valuations be withdrawn and that the Valuer General clearly articulate to us what was the method used in those valuations. How on earth do they come up with a valuation of $60,000 a hectare when the neighbouring property can't sell it for $30,000 a hectare and it's the same ground, same crop, same productivity, same proximity to water, everything? We do need to know that. We are writing today to the mayors in those municipalities saying that if these valuations stand, and we don't believe they should, but if they do, then council has an obligation and a capacity to adjust the cent in the dollar calculation that they make to bring the ultimate rates bill back to something which matches what it would be if it was in a house. So a CPI rise. I mean, we think they are highly overvalued when it comes to primary production, but let's eat this elephant one bite at a time. The first thing now is to do less harm. So councils have that obligation to reduce that cent in the dollar rate. Otherwise, farmers are going to get driven to the wall from something which is completely unproductive in terms of their rates bill.
Janie, you've been in the council game. Do you believe councils should adjust their rates to reflect the valued increases, or should they use some discretion and the ultimate impact on farming?
Well, I think Neil's outlined that there's lots of layers to this, isn't there? So there's the actual original revaluation, like is that sound? And if you've written to the Valuer General and asked them to outline.
Written to the Minister.
Oh, sorry. Yep, thank you. But if you have written and asked that to be explained, I don't know what the legislative opportunities are to pause the process, so I'm not clear about that. But that puts, because when you, so many things in Tasmania, and we've talked about some of them already. 3, 4, 5 steps down the process, we're trying to reconstruct and fix things that are actually broken at the beginning. So understanding that basis, the foundation for that valuation is really important. And working from there. And you haven't mentioned it, but I think one of the other things that TasFarmers have been talking about is based then on that valuation, should the AAV, which is one of the instruments in a rating decision, should the AAV be set around 4% of that valuation, or I think the TasFarmers position is maybe to take that back to 2%.
2%.
And so there's foundational questions there. And I'm not questioning the integrity of the process, but the strength of the original revaluation and then that AAV that's used, because then when the AAV comes to councils use that as a ingredient in the decision on how to base the rates. And yes, they can change that by how many cents in the dollar or parts of cents in the dollar that they apply to that AAV, but they would be correcting something in the base. Because the value of a property in primary production doesn't just impact rates. And I get that in terms of there are squeezes coming from everywhere at the moment. And, you know, farmers don't have a lot of control over a lot of that squeeze. They make great product and they sell it and create a great brand for Tasmania, but all of these other things are, you know, outside control. But that has a lot of other impacts in Tassie as well. And we talked about Rushy earlier. One of the things that I presented, I spoke in Parliament about Rushy, and one of the things that I included in that, and I got lots of feedback from the community about it, was the value of agricultural land in Tasmania now is preventing the next generation of farmers coming through. You can't buy land to start. Where it used to be, and you talked about Burt Farquhar, you know, where that would have been a stretch, but you can still get a start. It's really hard to get a start now. So what does that mean generationally for farmers in Tasmania? So there's all sorts of real implications of these valuations, not just in rates, not just in, you know, costs, but also in opportunities. And for Tasmania, we talked about the scarcity of land and making sure that land is used for best purpose, not just for financial return, but for community good as well. And so we've got to think about the impacts of those valuations on everything.
And you're absolutely right. So two things. You see that most in dairy farming, which always used to be the easiest way for young people to get into farming.
Yeah.
So you'd start off buying, you know, a herd of cattle, you'd lease the property and you'd get into owning your own farm. The consolidation of dairy farms is effectively blocking out that next generation coming through. So if I think about between Ledgerwood and Branxholme, I think on that back road there used to be 8 or 9 dairies through there. Now there's only one.
Yeah.
You think about the huge number of corporate dairies in Tasmania, which is soaking up those small dairies. But going back to Rushy, and I'm reluctant to do it, but I'll just point out that Rushy is made up of over 120 odd titles, all of which are about 1,000 acres. Now, is that not the perfect opportunity to bring young people into?
Which is what I said in my contribution.
You know, so we just continually, pardon the pun with the firearm, shoot ourselves in the foot, but then we reload and shoot in the other one. It's just, you know, it gets very, very frustrating, Janie.
So I'll be interested to hear what the response is around that initial revaluation process. I'm really happy to also advocate on behalf of that. I'm aware this has been an area of advocacy from TasFarmers for a long time, but there are lots of elements to it. And most importantly, there are lots of implications for it if it's not done well.
Yeah, there are so many little bits of red tape coming up that it's not going to take much for the catalyst to fill up Salamanca Square full of tractors and farmers.
Yeah, I can. There's been a lot of calls to me lately about extra costs transferred to farmers just in the last few weeks.
There's an injustice in this that I think we haven't even scratched the surface of. And it would appear that almost no matter what level of government, there's this desire to tax unrealised gains or unrealised equity. One of our members 2 years ago asked his local council about the rate rises, and the response he got was, it's a wealth tax. Your property is valued at this point. We believe you're wealthy, so you will pay a lot of rates.
Doesn't mean there's cash in the pocket.
Look, equity does not put groceries on the table, and to try and go after unrealised gains or unrealised equity, or even equity or value that isn't profitable. So, as you said, our local TasFarmers member that's just been revalued at astronomical numbers for that district, that extra value does not mean he's more productive. There is no more money. There's actually, like you say, less money coming in. all they're doing that, all the councils are doing, all the Valuer General is doing, and in combination, all they're doing is taking money out of those farming businesses that isn't there to begin with at the moment, and there is going to be less there if we don't get a turnaround in some commodity prices. So unrealised gains, wealth tax, whatever you call it, I don't know where it's going to stop, but everyone's got their hand in our pocket.
Back on the rates issue itself, if these higher rates do occur, should the state government step in?
So my steps through this process is that, and you guys would all be well familiar with Anita Dow from the North West Coast, farmer herself, and she's got the local government portfolio. Anita and I would discuss this together and see, what those implications are and where it's best for us to apply our advocacy. But it's not as simple as answering a question like that, because I'm a big believer. Life is getting messier and harder all the time. There are Band-Aids on Band-Aids and patches on patches all the time. So I think we've got to go back to getting those basics and those foundations right. So understanding if that valuation process and the valuations are sound, and if that's accepted, then looking at the rating process. But they're two different things. It's state and it's local government.
But states legislate the existence of local council, don't they?
Well, local councillors would always hate, and I am a local councillor at heart, to acknowledge that fact, Grayson. However, let's be serious. There is a role for state to play in terms of being certain about the decisions they're making in these revaluations, and there is a role for state to play in terms of consideration of advocacy around that 4% and 2%. And then, if we're clear on that and that's sound, then there is a role for consideration at council. I remember back in the day, many, many years ago, before the new revaluation process came in, where in between those 6-year jumps, there were the 2-year intervals sort of. So before that happened, we were getting these massive astronomical, steps. And there was a tool, and I can't remember if it was a City of Launceston tool or a statewide tool, where there would be a cap on the percentage increase of a rate at a time. So there's lots of things that council can consider. So the cents in the dollar, because it's hard for everyone. So it's hard for councils as well. So in terms of being able to gather their rates to deliver their services, but it would be a reasonable test for councils to say, are we getting an extraordinary or an unreasonable increase in rates because of these revaluations, and will we consider that? But that's something that Anita and I can talk about. Happy to engage with TasFarmers on it and see what advocacy is appropriate.
So surely this is a great opportunity for state and local government to show how much they value our farming community and our farmers by working together to come up with a sensible solution which helps our farmers survive during what are pretty tough times.
And I think that's where, someone like Mick Tucker, who heads up local government in terms of that, he's a pretty practical, regional sort of guy. So you get the minister and Tucker together and have that conversation, maybe something comes out of it.
Let's hope the fundamentals get fixed. Talking of fundamentals, at that high level, state GBEs touch almost every part of the farm business, whether it's energy, broken. Ports, transport or infrastructure. Janie, what's Labor's view on reforming GBEs? I know your leader came out earlier in the week and said they needed to be more accountable to the community more broadly than just, say, profits. What's Labor's view on reforming GBEs?
Well, even the state themselves have told the GBEs that it's not just about profits, but somewhere in the system it has completely... there's been a complete lack of focus and a complete lack of control around why the GBEs exist and what is their purpose. What are they trying to achieve? And it can't be profits. Price can't be everything. We've talked a lot about the importance of price and value and money and cash in the pocket versus equity and things here. But it is clear that GBEs were created to serve Tasmania, to act in the best interests of Tasmanians and Tasmania as a place. And so if they're not doing that, they've got to be called to account on it. And it's hard to find any GB at the moment that is doing a really good job at that. We used to say that culturally, someone like Tasrail was sort of a bit of a standout because so many of the others were challenged. But day in, day out, I have multiple engagements, whether it's someone on the street, whether it's an email or phone call or going in and out of a meeting where someone has a story to tell about a GBE, and they're never pretty. So So the question is, does there need to be reform? You know, we definitely need to look at our government business enterprise, decide, are they for purpose? What is that purpose? And are they actually delivering on that?
Surely something like hydro is set up for profit.
No.
Tas Networks
No.
is set up for profit. I mean, they've been. Should they be set up for profit? But they have been.
But it was either one election ago or 2 elections ago where there was a refreshed ministerial statement that said you've got to act in Tasmania's best interests. So.
But did
there
hydro
are
ignore
decisions,
that?
Well, 100%. But that's the whole problem with the system, right? We have got a collection of ministers, some that are fantastic and some that aren't, in terms of actually developing and delivering expectations to people that they've got responsibility through shareholder ministers that don't know how to actually drive and expect good outcomes. So if you are a minister and you direct a GBE to say that you've got to act in Tasmania's best interest and then they don't, then you've got to do something about it. And that's just, we could talk about going back to fundamentals and basics. That's just basics. There's more in life than price. And there's more in life to Tasmania, Tasmania's economy, our communities, and delivering things. We talked about how there's only a limited amount of land for primary production. There's only a limited amount of land for all sorts of things. There's only a limited amount of opportunity in Tasmania. If a GBE isn't delivering a return for Tasmanians and Tasmania, then you've got to question why it's there.
So how do we balance that with Hydro and Tas Networks push into things like Marinus and supplying power to the mainland, which is not... I mean, it's only in Tasmania's interest if we can turn a profit out of it. And do we do that at the risk of not providing cheap, affordable power to new industries in Tasmania or in fact, the existing ones?
Do you want to go there?
We just have, I think.
I'm on the record just in the last couple of weeks talking about there are energy opportunities in Tasmania now, and people are talking about price, and isn't it great because the government will end up with all this extra money that they can invest into education and hospitals and things in the community. Well, you know what? I reckon the moment's passed where people trust that the government's actually any good at that. And so returning $1 to a government that is challenged with its competence doesn't actually mean that that's good for Tasmanians. So we need to return more than $1. We need to actually return community good and community outcome and make sure that decisions are made. We support as a Marinus, and I can say that right here, that we continue to support Marinus. But it's interesting in the decisions that they're making in energy allocation recently, and this ties back to farming, because one of the things that I'm on record saying is if we expect the community to take a hit, so you turn about transmission and things for the development of new generation, and I'm a supporter of new generation in Tasmania, then how much new generation do we have to actually deliver, and therefore the community accept a hit for all these other things that we want to do in Tasmania? And if someone says to me, well, we get a better dollar out of it, but we don't get a better community good out of it, then, you know, how are those decisions being made? The government have said that, and you use new industry as an example there. So let's say we're talking about AI data factories. The government have said that they will, we talk about ministerial directions to GBEs, that they will write a statement of expectations around AI infrastructure. They will. They've already given away the power. Why would you write statement of expectations after you've already given the game away? So for me, let's get back to the question, GBEs, it's got to get the fundamentals right? And if you've got to agree on what the fundamentals are and you deliver an expectation to someone that they don't deliver, then you've got to hold them to account.
Because, one of the senior economists, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name at the moment, which is killing me, it's fundamentally set up state-owned companies and GBEs that if Tasmania fell by poor times, they could be effectively sold. I mean, that's the structure they have, in that they're state-owned companies, they're enterprises which could be sold. And some of them, there's an argument that we probably could.
Such short-term thinking, though. You know,
well, back
if you
then
think about the opportunities of our GBEs, then, and in terms of what they can return to Tasmanians, why would we sell that off to someone else? And that's a bit like our very first conversation. You know, we are a tiny state at the bottom of the world with capacity to do all these amazing things. We need to hold close to us the resources that we have, the assets that we have, whether it be the organisations, the entities we have that can always continue to deliver old and traditional things and new and interesting things.
So if that's the
Tasmania.
case, are state-owned companies and GBEs the right structure? Should not, if I take what you're saying I think in the right way.
God, what did I say?
Should they not then just go straight back into being a government department? So Hydro becomes another government department again.
Well, there's,
Tas Networks
the question is
becomes-
about reform. I think we've got to be open-minded, and I think Tasmanian Labor is open-minded, and I'm not going to speak for the leader, I'm not going to speak for the Shadow Treasurer or for any other people, but we have to be open-minded about what is the task we want, how is it best delivered, how does that best return a return for Tasmania. That's the solution. That's the problem that we have to solve.
Because one of your great Labor predecessors, Eric Rees, set up Hydro in the way it was to solve problems for Tasmania, not to solve problems for...
Yeah, but he wasn't selling monopolies off to the likes of Brookfield. It's very dangerous to sell off a state-owned monopoly to another as a monopoly, isn't it?
Well, that's my point. So isn't it better off back in government hands, and then you can do things like support new industries in those days, like in the 50s and 60s of, aluminium
Well, I
smelting.
think you've got to go down a credible
ferromanganese.
process one by one to make that decision. You can't make blanket decisions about that. So there are some things that, for instance, you look at, let's not touch on TasTAFE maybe, but you look at Homes Tasmania. Mark, what a process. Years of this whole take something out of the government, take it into this entity, bring it back, the waste of money and still no houses delivered.
No outcomes.
Yeah.
So if we flip this round into agriculture, why wouldn't we do the same with something like irrigation and make that completely controlled by state government and owned by state government without any muddying of the waters, pun intended, between a state-owned company and their shareholder ministers?
Well, many
and
good
just make it
schemes are community-owned, aren't they?
and just make it so that it's there for the interest
people
of
would love
agriculture.
their schemes. So there are some that would love their schemes to be community-owned, community-run. But I'm not going to make any announcements or decisions or anything at the table
come
here
on.
about this. But what I will say is that on a case-by-case basis, those things need to be considered. And back at fundamentals, at the baseline, the question has to be asked: what does Tasmania need? Where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities? What do we need? How best is that delivered for the benefit of Tasmanians?
Because for the Labor side of politics to come to the fore, that's the type of thinking that your party's going to need to articulate. This is our vision for Tasmania. This is where we want to be in 10 years' time.
Sure.
These are the bold decisions we're going to make to get there.
Sure.
Talking of bold decisions or the lack of,
Sorry, Grace,
no,
I've
I'm
hijacked
kind
your
of
agenda
winding
a little.
up and looking for a really
Trying to
bad
wind me up.
segue. Janie, can you tell us just quickly, biosecurity has hit the headlines in the
Yeah.
last few weeks. We're seeing a number of cases, WA, South Australia, now New South Wales. What's your understanding of the current bird flu situation as Shadow Ag?
So unless something's changed while we've walked into here, that not in our primary industries, not in production, that not in Tasmania. You say that it's been around for weeks. So we've been preparing for this for years, right? And one of my concerns is that the resources and the capacity and the agendas in departments aren't always at full capacity to deliver Tasmania. So I have concern. We had a briefing just last week, and I would love to be confident that the briefing that we provided meant that, and I think it's a when, not an if,
Yes,
bird flu
yeah.
comes to Tasmania, that the government is all across it, will scale up and manage it to the best of our abilities, and people will feel good about that. But as I move around the community and I talk to people that I would expect 100% have had contact from the department around what's happening. A local producer just in Bass I was talking to the other day, haven't heard from them.
Yeah, we haven't seen much of a communications plan yet.
That's a worry, right? It's a worry. But so what I will do now is use this as a communications opportunity. There is a really simple set of instructions for Tasmanians. Don't touch dead birds. If there's dead wildlife, don't touch it. So avoid, capture it somehow, take a video or a photo and then report it. There's some really clear reporting out there. www.birdflu.gov.au is out there, and there is also a what do you call it? A phone number that you a go-to line.
Hotline.
Hotline 1800 675 888.
Yep.
But so there's NRE and biosecurity, but there's also public health. So and I was talking to a primary industry, but not ag, so aquaculture the other day. I was out on a site on a fish farm the other day, and they've had no contact. They're going to be the first people that find,
And you see it.
yeah. And so So we've had briefings. I am assured that we're across it. I encourage the department and producers and people that are likely to be first point of contact to be as informed as possible and for the community to report. I remember when the Premier of South Australia made the announcement of their first detection, they'd had something like 760 tests before they got that positive. So if, look after yourselves and report. And that's one of the things that I love about Tasmania and Tasmanian farmers, but I worry for is that when there has been biosecurity issues in Tasmania recently, they've been self-reported and reporting has happened, and I think that's great. But how have the response has been, how are our resources, that sort of stuff,
Many farmers might agree with you. Just to wrap it up, just in short fire.
Didn't talk about transfer of cost. We did see in some ways, but I mean, just in the last couple of days, my phone's been ringing about, extra costs for audits, extra costs for the picks, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot going on in terms of that department. We've talked about, cost pressures on farmers, but trying to transfer all that out, I would hate to think that we're not in a position to respond well to this because of the lack of resources internally, and then that sort of fight to try and transfer those costs out that you were trying to wrap up. But I wanted to say that.
Sorry,
good reminder,
every week like this.
because Nathan, TasFarmers had a very clear position. It seems to be misunderstood in our own community on the charges of picks. They weren't announced in advance. They were simply done. There was no real consultation with the community or advice that this was coming, was there?
So there was some work done a couple of years ago. TasFarmers, I believe, we've looked at some of our records, and obviously we would oppose any extra fees, because any extra fee without any resulting extra resourcing or product is effectively a tax. So a pick fee with nothing else tangible that we can use or hold or access to us feels like a tax. But we did get feedback that no one opposed it. Everyone was in favour of it. I'd like to define everyone, because I know TasFarmers or TFJs we probably were at the time definitely would not have agreed with that, because our members would have there would have been blood on the walls. And the decision was made but deferred for 2 years apparently, and it was before my time as president. And I'm not saying Ian even knew about it really, but the decision was deferred for 2 years, and now that time's lapsed and it's come in. So we really need something for our money with the extra pick fees, but definitely not in favour of it. Our members aren't in favour of it. It's an extra cost with no extra tangible benefit.
Well, this is all about you really, Janie. So the biggest offer...
That's not all about me.
No, that's not about you. Sorry. Today's session is supposed to be a focus for you. Tas Agriculture's biggest opportunity, what do you think it is?
It's the sort of thing that Neil talked about earlier. I see my role, and I see the role of government, about creating the conditions where people can do their best. So the biggest opportunity for Tasmanian farmers is that they are supported to do what they do well, and to continue to innovate and continue to deliver premium products that generate this amazing reputation that we have here in Tasmania. One of the things, we had a session earlier in the week with business, and there was farmers in the room, and one of the clearest messages that came out of that was know when to sort of identify an issue, dig deep and drive hard to try and correct it, and know when to get out of the way. So the biggest opportunity for farmers, I think, is that government get out of the way when it's not a role to be there, and that when there are issues that need advocacy or when there's support required, get in, dig deep, work hard and keep going at it relentlessly until there's an improvement.
That's certainly been a consistent message of yours. If you did get government, what's the first thing you'd do within 100 days? Remove the pick charges?
I don't know about that. I can hear that message loud and clear. What my answer to that question was going to be, you raised deer at the top of the members' survey list, obviously. You jumped me on that question there. I had a phone call as recently as this morning from a producer who was irate about the pick charges. So, yes, that's obviously I would love to be in government tomorrow. I would love to be a minister. I am not. I would never get everything right, and I'll make some classic clangers. I am no doubt about that. However, I'm not looking to force an election on anyone anytime soon. So I reckon the pick charges issue could be resolved before I get there, which is partly why I was thinking about that. But deer management, top of your list.
Okay.
They're the sorts of things you got to take. I think you got to take the lead from the people doing the work that know it best, and know if they're the priorities, then they're my priorities.
Big picture, what does success look like for you in regional Tasmania within the next 10 years?
I take that right back to basics. Success for me is you walk down the street in a regional town, whether it's tiny or, bigger than tiny, and people have got a smile on their face. There are families engaged in the community. There is a community that has a school, it's got a local health service, that the foundations are in place. So success for me is people. It's people doing well. When people do well, then you can produce well, you can engage well, you can participate. The biggest driver for me for all of the years that I've been in public life is that people have a good life. And in Tassie, you can have a great life. And I'm going to finish off where we started with Rushy. That's been what's driven me around that advocacy for Rushy, is the idea that it could impact the school, which could impact families and communities. Life's tough enough, right? And right now, life is really tough for heaps of people, and for all sorts of really stupid reasons. Like there's a lot of chaos and a lot of stuff's out of control. So success for me is people doing okay, families doing okay, communities doing okay, and regional Tasmania feeling like there's movement, stuff's going on.
Fantastic. As always, closing down today's session. It's been a good one. It's probably outside of ag, might be inside of ag, but what keeps you up at night or maybe keeps you excited for the future, Janie?
Actually, not much keeps me up at night, because the only reason I do what I do and the only reason I can get up every day and have the energy I've got is that I'm a bloody great sleeper. But what worries me right now is very rare for me. I'm 52. It's very rare for me that I can't find flow and momentum in things. But in this last year, stuff's crazy, yeah? And just everything is there's just this sort of uncomfortable about a whole lot of stuff. So what keeps me up at night or keeps me worrying is, how do you bring that all back? How do you stop what seems to be, the horse is bolted in terms of this just weird. Life is weird. People are saying stupid stuff and people are offensive and disruptive and, intentionally. Like I used to say back in my council days, why do people wake up in the morning and just want to be nasty and negative? It doesn't make any sense to me, because I don't make sense of that. And that just seems to be where we're back at again now. So what worries me is, how do we get back in, and I'm not meaning control for control and power's sake, but how do we get back into control so we can make all these positive decisions for Tasmania, so we can be doing good work? Because there's so many fires.
Well said. Mr. Cox, there's obviously the last 10 minutes prior to this podcast was a bit exciting, but is it just Rushy keeping you awake, or are there other things?
Well, I knew you were going to ask this question, because you always do, and there's a few things that do give me pause for thought late into the evening. But Neil touched on something when we're talking about Rushy, about farmers feeling undervalued. And I think there's just been hit after hit after hit for agriculture and for our agricultural support networks like mechanics and everyone else. We talk about the rates going up. Well, we've seen rates in my particular council 100 to 100% for some of those support networks and their sort of real estate that they operate out of. So farmers wear all that cost. They wear all the stress of if it gets too expensive for those businesses to operate, their support network disappears because they close down or move out. And I just know how personally farmers take that, because what they do is personal. It's their life. It's what they've always wanted to do. It's what they'll continue to do. It's what they inherited from their parents. It's what they're going to hand on to their kids. And a lot of the hits they take are regulatory that they didn't deserve, they didn't ask for. But we're also seeing hits with prices. So things like potatoes, we're seeing massive hits with prices on top of everything else. So I think we've got to be really concerned as a community about how our farmers feel, about what they're putting up with, and about what that might look like. And we don't really want to think about some of that. So just I'll plug a couple of things here. One is if you're a producer out there or you're part of that agricultural support network and things aren't working out and bureaucracy, red tape, costs, lack of revenue or whatever it is starting to bite, give TasFarmers a ring. And there's other support mechanisms out there like Rural Alive and Well, Rural Business Tas. There's so many avenues of support out there for farmers that are stressed they're going to lose their potato contract, or the costs have gone up and the price has gone down to the point that they're no longer viable, or they want to switch out to a different enterprise, and that's out of reach because everyone's doing it. You've got TasFarmers, you've got Raw, you've got RBT. Reach out, talk to someone. Don't think you're in it on your own because everyone else is in the same boat at the moment.
It is about our externals as well as the farms, our communities, and making them vibrant very much so. Neil, you've got a long list, I imagine. Anything exciting keeping you up, or perhaps...
Look, from a positive side, it's only 3 weeks till the trout season opens. Look, keeps me awake at night. The whole potato issue keeps me awake. And it's not just because, a processor says $1 cut. It's just, so how do we see and plan for a vibrant future in cropping in Tasmania when the fundamentals seem to be going backwards? The growers meeting we had in Deloraine last week was a very sombre affair. Like, we had plenty of growers in the room. I reckon there's about 85 growers in the room. And normally with those personalities, it would be a vibrant to and forward conversation where no one would hold back. And the number of long pauses in that room where, to be blunt, there were some really good farmers who did not want to speak up for fear of losing a contract. And that we have got to that situation now, that keeps me awake at night, because how do you pull that back?
Some big issues, some strains on margins. Big shout out to all the growers who attended that meeting. Before we go, one last mention. Neil's book, of course, available at all good bookstores and online, Neil.
Yeah, I'm sure Petrarchs would have restocked by now.
And seriously, too, FarmX selling out quite quick. If you haven't got your ticket, Janie, jump on farmx.org.au, get your ticket. We've had many exhibitors and a great lineup of speakers, including Sam Kikovich. No, it makes sense. Yeah.
Sam Kekovich, Katie Nash, the list goes on. It's going to be awesome.
This is going to be the big thing of the year. Like, last year was brilliant. The vibe was amazing. What the team here at TasFarmers, pardon me, are doing around pulling together great speakers, great panellists, a great venue, and thinking about all the little things that make these things tick. It's going to be bloody awesome, and I hope there's just pretty much every farmer in Tasmania is there.
Well, thanks, Janie, for joining us and sharing your views and perspective on the major issues in Tassie.
My pleasure.
And, of course, thank you, Nathan, Mr. President.
Thanks, Grose.
And Neil.
Yeah, and thanks, Janie. It's not easy coming into a room like this when you've got some bloke like me asking you all the questions we didn't plan for. So thank you.
That's right. No, my pleasure.
But this was not the best day as a Labor member to come into a Tasmanian.
Well, I did say at the beginning, rock and a hard place, but you got to that. Hopefully, one of the things that I learned very early on in my local government days is people aren't always going to agree on what you do or your decisions, but if you've got a good relationship and you've built that trust and understanding, it's actually, for me personally, I've worked really hard and I'm really grateful for all of the people in the sector that I've met with and built a relationship with, that whether we agree on things or we don't, we can ring up and have a conversation and I can advocate for things that I understand. And I suppose that would be my finish here today. If there is anyone in the sector that needs some advocacy or wants to talk something through or thinks I need to learn something or wants to share something with me, the phone's always there.
Well, thank you again, and thank you to our members and to our partners, TasBuilt, Telstra, and thanks to everyone out there listening. We appreciate it. See you on the next episode.